Happy Thursday and welcome to the final daily Shakespeare for Kids 7+. I cannot believe that we've brought you 15 stories already, and today marks the 16th and final book from this wonderful series, Daily Shakespeare for Kids, Shakespeare Stories by Andrew Matthews and Tony Ross. Guys, thank you so much. I wonder if Andrew Matthews and Tony Ross have seen our Shakespeare stories. But anyway, today is Richard III, read by a very special guest, Martin. So I'm going to hand over to Martin and I'll see you after. Enjoy the story.
Hello everyone, my name's Martin and I'm a head teacher of a primary school in Hampshire. Welcome to Cherry Blossom Art's Daily Shakespeare for Children of 7+. Today, I'm going to be reading for you a Shakespeare story of Richard III. Just wanted to let you know how I got involved in Cherry Blossom Arts. Bex, also here as Rebecca, and you know by now, sings with me in the local fabulous choir around Salisbury and Wiltshire, the fantastic Evolution Choir. It's a great pleasure and a privilege to read for you today. So, on to Richard III and the characters. Well, we've got Richard III, and he's Richard, the Duke of Gloucester, later King Richard III. And then we've got the Duke of Buckingham, and he's a follower of Richard. At the bottom there, we've got Henry Tudor. He's the Earl of Richmond, and he later became King Henry VII. Then we've got King Edward IV and Prince Edward, King Edward's son. And then we've got Richard, Duke of York, which is King Edward's son as well. So Prince Edward and Richard, Duke of York, both King Edward's sons. And the scene, well, the scene is set in 15th century. So Richard III. Visit the battleground of Bosworth Field alone, and you will meet me without knowing it. My restless spirit will seem to be sighing of the wind through the branches of a tree, or the creeping shadow of a passing cloud. Long ago, I was flesh and blood like you. I was a king until I came here. On this field, I lost my crown, my kingdom, and my life. Before I became King Richard, I was Richard, Duke of Gloucester, son of the House of York, though my deformed back and my withered arm earned me the other titles. Richard Crookback, my enemies called me, Hedgehog and Spider. I had many names and many enemies, chiefly in the House of Lancaster. For almost 30 years, the Yorkists and the Lancastrians made war to decide who would rule in England. My brother, Edward, was king, until he was overthrown and exiled by King Henry. But he came back, with me and our brother George, Duke of Clarence, at his side. King Henry was imprisoned in the Tower of London for his own safety, and naturally our armies marched west and won a glorious victory over Edward, Prince of Wales, at Tewkesbury. The prince was captured unharmed, but somehow met with an unfortunate accident and died of stab wounds. While my brothers celebrated, I returned to London, paid a secret visit to the king in the Tower, and gave him the sad news of his son's death. Poor Henry was too gentle and too holy to live in this world. So I sent him to the next with the point of my dagger and gave it out that he had died of grief. The old king's tragic death set me thinking. The Yorkists had triumphed over the Lancastrians, but the result was more like a truce than peace. Just below the uneasy surface lay mistrust, hatred, and the desire for revenge. Such a situation, it grieved me to consider that wickedness a mischievous person might do, simply by dropping hints and spreading rumours. My way was clear. I could have supported my brother, the king, and toiled to reconcile the houses of York and Lancaster. But peacemaking was not to my taste. The time was ripe for someone to play the villain, and I was determined to be that someone. I would deceive and double deal and smile, even as I committed murder. When wars end, the victors often fall out, and so it was with us. I made certain of it. During his exile, my brother Edward was struck with a wasting disease that gave him a hollow cough and stretched his skin tightly over his bones. With the throne regained, he ruled England, but his sickness ruled him. He feared plots against him and spoke daily with astrologers, fortune-tellers, and the like. The night I received news that the king had issued a warrant for the arrest of the Duke of Clarence, I hurried to Clarence's house and met him in the street outside, accompanied by armed guards. "Why has our brother Edward done this, Clarence?" I cried. Clarence laughed carelessly. "Because my name is George," he said. "Some half-crazed wizard told him that his sons would be cheated of the throne by a man whose name begins with G." "This is the Queen's doing," I growled. "She encourages the king's wild imaginings." The captain of the guards saluted me. "I'm sorry, my Lord Gloucester, but I was given orders that no one should be allowed to talk to the prisoner," he said. "Please stand aside and let me do my duty." "Very well," I agreed. "Don't worry, Clarence. I'll make sure that you're not imprisoned long." As the guards marched their prisoner away to the tower, I smiled to myself, for it was I who taught the wizard what to say to the king and paid him to say it. "Oh, Clarence," I sighed, "as your brother, I want only the best for you, and it would be best if your soul was safe in heaven. I will arrange it soon, I promise you." The first part of my plan had been successful, and with a light heart I made my way to Westminster to find and to begin the second part, winning myself a bride. The interior of the abbey was glowing with candlelight. Great stone pillars soared into the darkness. All around me, as I searched to the side chapel where the coffin containing the body of the late King Henry lay, awaiting burial the following morning. The coffin had been placed on an altar and draped with an embroidered cloth. Before the altar, dressed in mourning robes, was Lady Anne, the widow of Prince Edward. I had heard her beauty praised, though it was little past her prime, but I also heard talk that she was weak-willed and easily led. Now I was about to put that rumour to the test. Lady Anne turned as she heard me slip into the chapel, her eyes widening in loathing. "What black magician conjured up you fiend?" she hissed. I bowed. "I learned you were keeping vigil here tonight, and I came to offer my respects." Lady Anne quivered. "I don't want your respects, you filthy toad," she raged. "I want the earth to open up and swallow you back down to hell." "I don't know what angels could be so angry," I said, flinching. "Why do you speak so harshly to me?" "You murdered my husband," squeaked Lady Anne. "So I did. But do you know why?" I retorted. "Because your lovely face burned in my every waking thought, and in my dreams the idea of you in someone else's arms was more than I could bear. Jealousy drove me out of my wits." Lady Anne's feelings showed in her look. She was both horrified and fascinated, as though she found me repellent, yet attractive. Then came my master stroke. I fell to my knees, drew my dagger, closed Lady Anne's hand around the hilt, and bared my neck. "See, if I can't have your love, give me your hate and kill me," I pleaded. And for a moment I thought she would, but she faltered, and the dagger dropped from her fingers and clattered on the flagstones. I picked it up and pressed the edge of the blade to my throat. Tell me to kill myself, I sobbed. No, said Lady Anne. No, I don't want you dead. I gave her my most adoring gaze. But may I live in hope, my lady? I murmured. We were married 5 days later. Though the king's health was failing fast, he ignored the doctors who advised him to rest, and insisted on holding a banquet to honour my new bride. Invitations were sent out to the great and the good, and also to those who were not so good. On the morning of the banquet, I gave my faithful and highly inventive follower, Tyrrell, a warrant permitting him and a companion to enter the tower and question the Duke of Clarence. Tyrrell returned alone at dusk. I found his report most gratifying and almost amusing. At the banquet, King Edward proposed a toast to the House of York and added, I have good news concerning my brother Clarence. I have signed his pardon, and he will be set free tomorrow. I waited for the murmurs of approval to die down before I spoke. Your Majesty, I said hesitantly, has no one informed you? Clarence is dead. He was found this afternoon in the cellars of the tower, drowned in a barrel of wine. I'd often warned him of the dangers of drinking, but he paid me no attention. The king fell back into his chair and was racked by a fit of coughing, blood gushing from his mouth. Servants, shouted Queen Elizabeth, carry the king to his bed, call the royal physicians. As the guests waited for the news of the stricken king, they broke into groups and chatted. I found myself in the company with the Duke of Buckingham, a man with a reputation for greed and treachery. I admired him. I wonder what the king's brother, Lord Rivers, is discussing so earnestly with Lord Grey, Lord Hastings, and the Earl of Richmond, I said, as I poured more wine into Buckingham's goblet. How to thwart your ambitions, my lord, he replied. I pursed my lips. Oh, do I have ambitions? You desire to wear the crown, my lord, said Buckingham. Suppose I did wear it, would you be for me or against me? I inquired. Buckingham took a sip of wine. I am loyal to whoever can afford me, he said. Would the earldom of Hereford buy your support? I mused. Buckingham inclined his head. My lord, I am your man. At that moment, the doors of the banqueting hall flew back, and Queen Elizabeth appeared. Her hair was in disarray, and tears lined her pale cheeks. The king is dead, she announced. His dying wish was for his brother, Richard of Gloucester, to be appointed Lord Protector and given guardianships of our young sons. It was neither the time nor the place for grinning, so Buckingham and I smiled at each other with our eyes. And so I became guardian to my nephew, Edward, Prince of Wales, who was 12, and to my namesake, Richard, Duke of York, who was 10. Edward would be crowned king, and I would rule in his name until he was 21. This arrangement caused me some distress. To wield power for a few brief years and then surrender it to my nephew seemed unsatisfactory to me. I thought long and hard about what obstacles lay between me and the throne, and how best to remove them. Buckingham and I burned out many candles in our secret nighttime conferences, but our time was well spent. The nation was rocked with the chain of sensational scandals. Papers came to light that proved Lord Rivers and Lord Grey were scheming to kidnap the young princes and hold them to ransom. The traitors were arrested, tried, and beheaded. So to protect my nephews from other evildoers, I had them moved into the tower where I could keep a close eye on their welfare. Meanwhile, Henry Tudor, Earl of Richmond, suddenly left England for France. Shortly after, my French spies reported that he was attempting to raise an army against me. But I was not alarmed by this. Henry Tudor had Welsh blood in his veins, and what Welshman had ever amounted to anything? More disturbing was the tale that Lord Hastings had boasted of how I would never be king while his head remained on his shoulders. I had the strangest feeling that another shocking scandal was at hand. It broke during a meeting that I called to decide a date for my nephew's coronation. Hastings was present with Buckingham, Lord Stanley, and the Bishop of Ely. Hastings made a long and flowery speech that ended with a suggestion that I should fix the day. My response was a loud groan and a heavy sigh. Ugh. "Are you unwell, my lord?" asked Hastings. "Sick at heart," I replied. "Tell me, Lord Hastings, what sentence would you pass on those who used witchcraft to harm the royal family?" "Why, death," Hastings said without hesitation. "Then you have passed the sentence on yourself, my lord," I exclaimed, "for you and the late King Henry's wife cursed me with your dark magic." "No!" cried Hastings. "No!" I echoed, raising my withered arm with its clawed hand for all to see. "If I was not cursed, then how do you explain this?" Hastings' eyes were empty. I had him, and he knew it. I cannot explain it, my lord," he stammered. The Bishop of Ely was dumbfounded. "This man should stand trial at once," he mumbled. "No need for a trial," I said. "His guilt is written on his face. Guards, take Lord Hastings outside and put him to death." The hardest blow of all was quick to follow. Buckingham chanced upon an old chronicle that made it plain that my brother Edward, while still an infant, had been betrothed to the daughter of a French nobleman. The betrothal had been long forgotten, and rediscovery of her far-reaching consequences. It meant that Edward's marriage to Queen Elizabeth had been unlawful. My nephews were illegitimate, and so barred from inheriting their father's crowns. Imagine my feelings when I heard of this. Bands of Londoners took to the streets, calling for me to be made king. These loyal outbursts were arranged by Buckingham, who also led the delegation of city worthies, who implored me to take the throne. I protested that I was weak and unworthy, but at last they persuaded me to put my duty before self, and I accepted the heavy burden of kingship. Events moved swiftly. 2 days before my coronation, I was told that Richmond had set sail from France in command of an invasion fleet. I ordered my navy to sink it. At my coronation feast, my wife Anne fell ill with stomach pain and sickness and had to take to her bed. That evening, Buckingham brought grave news to my private chamber. "Gales have kept your navy in port, sire," he told me. "Richmond has landed on the coast of Wales. Lord Stanley and the Bishop of Ely have joined forces with him." "Ha!" I scoffed. "After I've crushed them, I'll have their heads spiked on London Bridge." I lowered my voice. "Buckingham, issue a proclamation that the Queen is fast approaching her death." Buckingham raised his eyebrows. "Is she, sire?" "If she is not, I've paid a good money to an apothecary who lied about the poison he supplied me with," I said. "The Queen is too old to give me the male heir I need. And when I've put down this rebellion, I'll marry my niece, Elizabeth. She's young and strong." "Oh, and kill my nephews, would you?" Buckingham cocked his head, as though he misheard. "Sire?" "My nephews are a threat to my royal line. I want them dead," I snapped. "Majesty!" blustered Buckingham. "Give me a little time to—" "There is no time, Buckingham," I interrupted. Buckingham stiffened. I'm afraid I must remind your Majesty that you have not kept your promise to make me Earl of Hereford. I smiled. Promise, Buckingham? I promised you nothing. Leave me. We will speak again once your memory has improved. When Buckingham had gone, I softly called out, Tyrrell! Tyrrell flowed out of the shadows and stood beside me. Sire, I fear that Lord Buckingham will return against me, I said. He has no stomach for the business I discussed with him. Depend on me to deal with it for you, sire, said Tyrrell. But bear in mind, they are anointed princes, I warned. Don't shed their precious blood. Not a drop, sire, Tyrrell vowed. And he was true to his word, for later he described to me how he smothered my nephews. War gathered like clouds in a stormy sky. More nobles deserted me for Richmond, including Buckingham, who was taken prisoner by one of my generals in the course of a minor skirmish. The general sent to me Buckingham's head, which I regarded as a great kindness. Richmond's forces marched east. I marched my enemies west to meet him, until we faced each other at Bosworth Field. The night before the battle, I dreamed that I was visited by the ghosts of my victims, who predicted my defeat. I woke up in a cold sweat. Oh, my conscience gives me nightmares, but nothing else, I murmured to the dark. I won wealth and power without it, and made myself the man I am, the villain I set out to be. The sly viper Richmond outwitted me and attacked before dawn when my forces were not fully prepared. His artillery blew gaps in my front lines and his cavalry surged through. My soldiers might have rallied, but my best commander, the Duke of Norfolk, was reported slain and his troops retreated in confusion. I tried to bring up reinforcements, but the cowardly Earl of Northumberland refused to obey my orders. The day was lost. The best that I could hope for was to make my escape. Then a volley of arrows cut my steed from underneath me. I staggered through the smoke of battle, shouting, "A horse! A horse! My kingdom for a horse!" And if in reply a horse appeared, a dappled grey war-horse galloped towards me, with Henry, Earl of Richmond, on its back. I saw him lean sideways, saw light flash on the blade of his battle-axe as he swung it. My memories end there. I was wrong about Henry Tudor. He amounted to something after all. My crown was placed on his head, and he founded a line of monarchs that lasts to this day, for his distant descendants still live in royal palaces. As for me, I've shrunk to a breath of wind, a trick of the light. When I am remembered, I am Richard the Bloody, Richard the Tyrant, who slaughtered the princes in the Tower. Well, it's better than being completely forgotten. In the end, villainy has granted me a kind of immortality. And that's the story of Richard III. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you'll share it with as many people around the world as you possibly can. So thank you very much for listening today. And this is part of the Cherry Blossom Arts Daily Shakespeare for Children of 7+. I hope you enjoyed Richard III. Thank you very much all. Bye for now.
Hey you guys, welcome back. Thank you so much, Martin, for reading Richard III, and thank you for being our final guest storyteller for the last Shakespeare series. I'd also like to say a massive thank you to our other guest storytellers. We've had Katie, Lulu, Tina, Claire, Ali, Angus, Harry, Ronnie, and Martin. I think I got all that right, and I did some too. So thank you guys for being our guest storytellers. We really enjoyed having you. But also I want to thank the audience, because we have had people tuning in from all around the world, and we have made some wonderful connections with some friends of ours across the pond. You would have seen some videos. Thank you so much, Lois, for sending those to us. And we want to continue that community. We've had over 10,000 views on our Shakespeare Stories series. So thank you guys. Thank you for watching. We're really, really pleased you enjoyed it. We've decided though, from next week, we want you to read to us. Yes, kids, you to read to us. So from next week, we're continuing a series, but it's going to be short stories and poetry. So Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Thursdays and Fridays at 5 o'clock, you are going to read to us short stories and poetry. So if you're interested, contact us now, send me a message and I'll send you all the details. All right, guys? But from me and from my gorgeous friend, Betty Boop, we will see you next week. Thanks for joining. Take care. Have a great weekend. Bye. Mwah.